Hi there, I'm Laura Stebbing, co-CEO of accelerateHER. Welcome to those of you who've just joined this session, which we're co-hosting with Founders Forum Health Tech. I could not be more excited to introduce this next session with the wonderful Professor Dame Donna Kinnair, Chief Executive and General Secretary of the Royal College of Nursing. For those of you that don't know, the Royal College of Nursing is the voice of nursing across the UK. It promotes patient and nursing interests by working closely with the UK government and other national and European political institutions, as well as trade unions, professional bodies, and voluntary organisations. Donna, thank you so much for joining us today.
Welcome. Welcome.
Starting with really the obvious, COVID-19 has pushed the NHS to the absolute limit and put healthcare workers under immeasurable pressure. How are you doing?
Well, I think we're doing fine, actually. I mean, it's been really, really tough going. It's been a year like no other year ever. 2020 was meant to be the international year of the nurse and the midwife.
Yes.
And so I think that COVID-19 coming along, it's called on our profession to give and to sacrifice more than ever could have been expected in a lifetime, really. And what I feel has happened is the public have understood the value of nursing more than ever. And it's really given us a profile, both with the public, with our employers, with the policymakers, that actually says we're a profession that now needs to be really valued, because it is when you're in your time of need and a profession stands up and is counted that you recognise the need that you have for it.
Absolutely, and yeah, 100%. And hopefully you've seen people and seen society really stepping up. And I'd love to hear a bit about your approach to leadership during this time. What have the biggest challenges been for you, and what's been important to you in your personal leadership of the nursing workforce this year, and this year like no other?
I think in order to lead a Royal College and a trade union, you've got to have a combination of a real passion for the things you're leading for. So I've got a real passion for nursing. I think fairness and equity, justice, and doing the right thing has always been so important to me, equality and equity. I remember even as a very young child, fairness and equity was so important. And I think that I personally believe, and throughout my whole career, that if you do the right things for the people that work for you, they will in turn do the right things for patients. Or even if you're in a shop, if you do the right thing by your staff, they will do the right thing by customers usually. Mm-hmm. So I think if I want patients to be treated appropriately, which is why one desire as a nurse, that I need to ensure that all the nursing staff and as many healthcare workers as possible is treated in the correct manner. And you will know that when we started going into this pandemic, there were huge shortages in nursing. I think estimated across UK, just for the NHS alone, we had 50,000 shortage in nursing staff. Wow. That's nurses. Yeah. If you think about, that's just the NHS. So if you think about the health and care sector, the care home sector, that would be about 100,000. So if you put that together, if we're going to make the provision of care work for our people, for the people that turn up to use those services, it has to be in the first instance adequately staffed. And you will know that even prior to COVID, it was something that you heard me talking about continuously. We need them adequately staffed, adequately educated, and part of that has to be with recognised and valued, but also being paid adequately.
Absolutely.
Because if you can sort of be a nurse or have trained as a nurse and you look across the road and you think, well, actually for the same sort of money I could work in Lidl, then you know that your high skills are not valued as well as they should be. And actually life could be so much better for you if perhaps you just worked across the road. So for me, it links directly to how we recruit and grow our nursing workforce. And it is a hard job and it's immensely rewarding for most of us. But actually it is a job where you need a variety of skills. And I think that's been the thing that's driven me really around being passionate about it. It's a critical job. It's critical for the lives of our people and the health of our nation. So I'm absolutely, my ambition is to overcome those challenges so that actually I make it work for people and care.
Yeah, and it's been wonderful to see you as the face of that. And speaking of that, I mean, when you took the position, this position in 2019, you became the UK's second Black woman trade union leader. You've talked about breaking the glass ceiling and tackling those sort of structural inequalities to get there. I'd love to hear a little bit more about your experiences and what some of the actions were that you took to kind of get to where you are now in this leadership position.
So I wouldn't describe me as having broken the glass ceiling, because there are lots of ceilings to break, I think, being a woman in leadership. I perhaps would say the biggest issue in tackling inequalities is ensuring that I personally was in the right place and confident enough to deal with the issues that I face on a daily basis. And there's something about, I think, perhaps as you get older, being comfortable in your own skin, so that actually you can tackle or some of the microaggressions or the behaviours. I mean, you know, it would be silly of me to sit here and try to convince you that sometimes when I walk into a room that people are happy to see me as a Black woman. I mean, first of all, some of them aren't even happy to see me as a woman, let alone a Black woman. And there are plenty of instances in doing this job where, you know, the message has come back that we perhaps won't want to listen to a woman, let alone a Black woman. So I think the most important thing for me is making sure that I'm in the right place and I'm confident enough to do my job, irrespective of some of the things that I might face. And that actually, you know, it really sits with me that sometimes when people go low, I need to remember that I need to go higher. A bit Michelle Obama.
Absolutely.
You know, it's always important for me to be firm but pleasant. You know, because I need to do my job well, and I need to do it. I think, unlike most men, you almost need to do it with style as a woman, don't you?
Yeah.
You have to do it with that grace and that style and that integrity and professionalism that actually maybe if I was a man I would get away without having. But actually as a woman I think it's really important. And the other thing I'd say is that fortune favours the bold. So there are lots and lots and lots of times when I take a deep breath, and it's not that I haven't got the fear or I'm not worried about what I'm walking into, but I take a deep breath and I remain calm, and I have to do it anyway, because if I've got the passion in my stomach and I know that I'm doing the right thing and I've got a really good enough reason for tackling something, I know that I will do it. And it's been, I don't know whether it's to my credit or discredit really, but that has been something that's driven me all of my life. I can't just hold it. I can't just let it go if it's something I feel really passionate about. And even as a young health visitor, I remember, you know, my very early days doing walking the community and doing community development. If there was something that I felt was unjust, I would have to take some action. And, you know, I remember at one particular time, you know, I had all the mothers out taking over the local school because something terrible had happened to one of my clients. You know, I didn't appreciate as a young health visitor that in tower blocks at that time, there was no escape route. So when a fire broke out, and that's where we used to house all our young mothers, this woman couldn't get out and ended up, although we caught the baby, she actually fell and broke her back. And I remember having all mothers in that tower block out, taking over a school, and we did not move until every single mother got rehoused into not a high-rise tower block. So I think if it's a cause and there's a passion within me, it isn't necessarily about me. It isn't about breaking my glass ceiling. It's more often about doing the right thing. It's about tackling those structural inequalities for others. And if I'm honest, that's what has enhanced my career really, is that bit about I don't really care about my personal goals or ambition, but actually, if I'm doing a job, I have to do it well. I have to do it well on behalf of those that I serve. And so it's not necessarily just about being a woman, but it's about doing the right thing for me.
Gosh, that is just so inspiring, and I can't believe that, I didn't know those things happened, and incredible
Mm.
the changes that you've been able to bring to bear over your career. And you've talked about that a little bit in relation to the pressure really of being a role model, and being a kind of the perfection in a way that you have to be as a Black woman in that role model position.
Yeah, it's an interesting role, isn't it? Because I think whatever way you look at it, being a woman is hard enough. But being a Black woman is even harder, because for me, it's always important to leave a position in a way that actually, if another Black woman or another Black man comes along, they're not going to say, oh, we've had one and look at how that turned out. It has to be actually that was a good role model, because to be honest, there's no other way of putting it, but there are many disadvantages for you if you happen to be a Black person, whether they're because the system has been created by white people for white people, whether it's any of those things that we might turn to, that it's very clear to us that there is a disadvantage. So for me, I kind of try and work with all people. I try and be professional with all. I try and remember not to lose my rank, because actually I need to make it safe for the person that comes behind me. And that could be a woman, but it also could be a Black woman, it could be a Black man that actually suffers a disadvantage because of the colour of their skin.
Which is a huge and kind of unnecessary burden. But I mean, I wanted to talk about this, what it could be called another pandemic, really, that of racial injustice. And you've been very vocal about the fact that the health service is failing people of colour, both in terms of the patients using it, but also the workforce. And we obviously saw that heightened over COVID-19 in terms of the workforce, where I think it was 60% of the healthcare workers that died were people of colour. What can and should we be doing to address these deeply structural inequalities?
I think the first thing that COVID did is we noticed it. We noticed it. I went back to work on the front line at least a day a week while COVID was going on. And I actually worked in the Nightingale Hospital in East London. And there was no way that you could not notice it. So as you saw rows of ventilated patients, and most of them, 99.8% of them were Black and from ethnic minority groups, there is no way that you couldn't notice that. So I think whether the disease inadvertently affected more because of the structural inequalities, it was in your face. The first 10 doctors that died were BAME doctors. Yeah. The nurses that died, the majority of them were from the BAME community. So actually, we couldn't help but notice it. But what it also demonstrated is that because it was very visual in the way that COVID came about, we know that there are many conditions that you won't notice as very visual. So whether it's the heart disease, whether it's the diabetes. And what COVID actually showed me is that we hadn't even collected ethnicity of people going into intensive care units. Wow. We didn't do that. So how would we have known if SARS had affected BAME people unless it was so in your face at the time that we saw all those BAME people dying? So I think for me, it raised awareness. It raised awareness that we needed the data. It raised awareness that actually we had something going on, whether it was because of the cultural norms that existed for some BAME people in their communities, whether it was that they lived more closely together because of the spread. I mean, it's phenomenal that we had streets in London where every house was practically affected by COVID-19. And we know that they belong to poorer neighbourhoods. We know that the places of transmission were buses, tubes, trains in the general public community. And we know that there were people that through COVID still had to work in order to survive. So there were many, many things that it has shone a light on. Now, the problem for us is when it shines a light on these things, what action do we need to take? Yeah. And as I said earlier, we have got a system that's predominantly predicated on a system that was built for white people. So how do we now think about the impact our system has in terms of access to those people that it wasn't built for? So we do need a system that works, that reaches in to our communities, that works with our communities, that co-produces with our communities. Even when I was a commissioner many years ago, and I realised that most of the amputees in the area that I was working with were BAME people, and that's because of the diabetes or the other conditions that affected them, that they ended up with most of the amputations. So we have got to, the first start is acknowledging it. It's got to be the starting place. And then, we've seen all these initiatives come and go, but I think it's important now that we work with those communities about what's culturally appropriate, how we can fix it. And, it's not just saying, oh, gosh, I'm co-producing with this BAME community and it sounds really fashionable. They don't even have the language to access our communities. They don't even know what we're talking about when we're talking about commissioning this and commissioning that. But what we do know is that actually, if we've got a diverse NHS, and we use the people that have some understanding of some of those conditions. So I can tell you as a nurse, when I started training, even though I come from a Black community, I had no idea about the impact of sickle cell because it's not in my family. I had no idea about the impact of sickle cell on young people's lives and how much school they missed and how much pain they were in. And I worked in a system that actually, when a young person sickler walked through the door, now, what it's like if you've damaged the roots, the nerve roots, and how painful it is. Yeah. The reaction of those that were in leadership positions is that's just a person seeking drugs. That's a junkie, or that's somebody that is exaggerating their pain. Can you imagine? I grew up in a system where we treated sicklers as people that were coming into A&E trying to get pethidine, and actually no acknowledgement. And that's what I mean when I say a system that's created for white people, that understands how to treat white people. And actually, in order to get sickle right, it had to be Black activists, Black advocates that went out and sort of started to educate people. Like myself, my education came from a patient. I went to nursing school, but my predominant education in thalassemia and sickle cell anemia came from the patients that I was looking after.
And presumably the education that you had was not teaching you those things because it was, structured by white people. So that I think, and, this really goes right to the top of the leadership point, which is, again, at the NHS, at the top of the NHS, you're not, it's not reflective of the workforce or of the community that it serves. And again, looking at, I think that you've said that there's only 10 BAME chief nurses across the NHS in England, and that not having that that reflected, the different societal groups reflected there is means that we're not able to change to make sure that people understand things. And so I guess what would you say to make us drive, or the NHS drive that change of getting the leadership right?
I think 10's a start. Yeah. Come on, Laura, I grew up in a world where when I say to my children, imagine growing up in a world where there were no people of colour on television. Yeah. Imagine growing up in a world where, our fun on a Saturday night was the black and white minstrels, and there were no Black people in the black and white minstrels. Oh. So, and they can't believe it, but that was my experience. I can remember when Trevor McDonald came on television and we all ran to see a Black newsreader on television.
Yeah.
And he still had an English accent. So the world has moved on. And
Yes.
I have to say that in medicine and other things, we're getting more women in leadership.
Yeah.
We are getting more BAME people because the world will change, and there are more BAME doctors. There are, my son's one of them. There are more people that are actually entering these professions, and it's a better world than when I was a young girl. So what I say about that is that actually it is important. We need to recognise that the system has been created for a particular set of people, and it's not nearly enough. But it's not, what I can tell you, and I always start from this position, it's not because we haven't got enough able Black people out there.
Absolutely.
So I'm not going to acknowledge or participate in a deficit model that sits, you just need a bit more coaching or a bit more education or a bit more of this or a bit more, when in reality, we need an open mind when we're actually appointing those people.
100%.
Stop judging people based on the colour of their skin. So in terms of making it better, I think it's important for people like me to say those things. Well, I chair meetings sometimes and I hear this nonsense about, well, maybe they need a bit more coaching. No, they don't. Maybe you need to be open-minded and recognise that your white privilege has got you to where you are. And actually, if you give these people a chance, they will also come good. So I think there's something about, let's stop having the fluffy conversation. Let's start having the right conversation. And when people start to insinuate, I chaired a meeting not long ago, and the first thing someone said was, not all Black people want to be in positions of power. Well, that's a nice starting point. We're going to get them there, aren't we, by saying not all of you want to. That helps to fulfill what you think should be the criteria. And so for me, I'm very clear about when I hear it, I will call it out. Yeah. I will say, let's now take it. I'm not a deficit here. I'm not here because somebody gave me a chance. Yes, they did. But equally, I'm here because I've got the skills and the ambition and the qualities and the education to fulfill a role. Yeah. So I think that it's really, really important that I acknowledge that it's a better world than the one I grew up in. Yeah. It's a better starting point. I think for me, there's something about how we bring our children into this world and we give them that level of ambition that they need to be equals. And then there's something about making sure that people like myself are supportive of those coming up behind. So I haven't got all the answers. I can tell you it's not because I'm not as able, and although some people will try and insinuate that it might be. And I think it's important for the people like myself to lend a helping hand for those to say, actually, you can do this in the same way, and recognise that it's not just the BAME community that has an obligation. All of us have an obligation to make society better. It's not just the Donna Kinnears, it's all of us that are in any leadership position. We need to challenge ourselves. We need to be comfortable with our views and make sure that our judgments are open-minded and not based on the colour of someone's skin.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. This is about, I always say this isn't about changing women, making them more confident or doing all these things. It's actually about changing systems and structures because, women are perfectly great as they are. And that goes across all the things we've been talking about. Donna, I'm really interested to hear from you in what role tech's played in the healthcare industry this year. Obviously, we're here at London Tech Week. What are the kind of exciting innovations that you've seen coming out of 2020 around COVID-19 and some of the things that it's solving for here?
So for me, I think it's been amazing. Tech has played a huge role. I've completely worked from home and managed to support nurses during this whole pandemic, working on Teams and things that the NHS would never have had access to. I think those changes are here to stay. Some of our consultations have been online, and although it's not recommended for use for everybody, just think about you and I being young, fit people, not having time to sit in a GP waiting room, that actually can dial up, get all our medications online, just have a quick conversation if you need to speak to somebody without walking into somewhere. I think I've seen huge benefits. There have been whole outpatients that for older people as well that have been done online. Why have them dragged down to an outpatient unit to sit there? It means that they're in charge of their time and actually can have an appointment on time. And then I've worked for a long time with in sexual healthcare, and I chair a company at this moment. And that started by giving young people control of their destiny, really. They get all their medication online, they get their testing online. They don't have to walk in and be embarrassed to see me as a nurse and feel embarrassed about whether they've got any kind of condition, any sexually transmitted disease. They don't have to come in front of me. It can be diagnosed remotely and they can be sent the medication and they can have a consultation. So we're making huge waves in terms of using both AI and technology in terms of diagnosing and treating people remotely. So it's really wonderful. And every single time I meet somebody from the tech industry, they're talking about, giving people access, giving people control over their information. All sorts of things are happening that I think will revolutionize healthcare.
One of the sort of silver linings that's come out of this really challenging year. And Donna, thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute joy over 30 minutes. So inspiring. You really are a real inspiration. So thank you for everything that you do and for coming to accelerateHER and London Tech Week.
Thank you.